It has been a little while for me, so I am thankful that we have so many other, with Troy and Dave, capable men willing to fill this and able to do that. And while I took a little break around the birth of Maya, I appreciate all the calls, the letters. I know we had a letter last time, but all the love that we've received. I want to thank all of you verbally for that. I was reminded this past week, I'm too loud for it to be that high. I was reminded this past week, I can go without it. I was reminded this past week of a episode of The Office, and since my brother referenced The Office from here, I get to as well. And there's a scene where the group is going out after work for a little office get-together. And one of the members who doesn't like to attend these sort of things says, well, he can't because of the baby. And then he talks about, off to the side, about how a baby is great. It gets you out of so much stuff that you don't want to do, because somebody can ask you for stuff, and you go, I'm sorry, I got to go home, have the baby. And I was reminded of that this week, and I thought to myself, well, you could do that with anything. We can justify, we come up with reasons, we can force excuses for a lot of things if we really, really want to. So as we talked this past year, so far, about being ready to serve, I want to talk about some of the things that are holding us back, some of the hindrances, some of the reasons, some of the excuses that we come up with. Now, this isn't going to be an all-inclusive list. Like I said, there's a reason you can come up with anything not to do something. But we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some themes and some things that we've come up with or I've heard of reasons we don't serve. The first one is a worldly view of fairness. And what I mean by that is the world will tell you that we should help those who deserve it. There are those that deserve our help. There are those that deserve our service. And there are those that don't. There are some that have maybe just, had the bad luck. And there are some that have put themselves in that situation. They deserve to be in the position they are. And the world loves to separate people into groups. They love to say those that deserve help and those that don't deserve help. There's us and then there's them. They separate along all sorts of things. If you look just on the news, you can see separation by gender, you can see separation by age, you can see separation by nationality, political affiliation. The world loves to separate into groups, and oftentimes when they do this, there's us, who we care about and are right, and them, who we don't care about as much and we don't help. And if you don't believe me, if you don't believe that the world treats some groups differently than others, go to an NFL game and cheer for the away team. You will get much worse service from everybody around you. Nobody will hold the door for you unless you're cheering for that home team. And that's a simple, silly example, but the world separates all the time. You think about, if you ask somebody just on the street who deserves help, a veteran serving from PTSD or a homeless person who's struggled with drugs and is addicted all the time. And you try to get them in rehab and they fall out. You try to get them in rehab and they fall out. The world will separate those who deserve help and don't deserve help. And I understand that we all have limited resources. There are only so many people that we have the time, the money, the resources to help. Unless one of you is Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates in disguise, we can't end homelessness in America. We don't have the resources to do that. However, I think if we look in Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus is separating those from his right and those from his left, when he tells them what distinguishes one side from the other, he says, whatever you have done for the least of these. When did we see you hungry, thirsty, sick, in prison, and not visit you? Well, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. I think we're called to serve everyone. I think we're called especially to take care of the least. Jesus did. If you look out throughout Jesus' life, there were times where he interacted, he helped, he served those who were considered the lesser part of society. If you think about the adulterer caught in adultery, the adulterous woman, he could have very easily walked away. This person doesn't deserve my help. I don't need to answer this question that the crowd's giving me. The Samaritan woman, he didn't need to engage with her. She was the scorn of society. That's why she was there in the middle of the day. Tax collectors. He went to Zacchaeus' house. Zacchaeus was the worst of the tax collectors. And he spent time with them. But the world will tell us otherwise. The world will tell us there's people who need help, and people who deserve help, and people who don't deserve help. And as Christians, we may experience that, good and bad. There are people who will treat us nicer, treat us better because they know we're Christians. There are people who will treat us worse, who will do things to try to test us, trick us, catch us into doing something where they can say, I knew you were one of those hypocrite Christians. They'll treat us better, they'll treat us worse. And oftentimes, that just reflects the way we treat them. We serve those who serve us. We serve those who treat us nicely. We serve those who love us. But if we look in Luke chapter 6, Jesus is talking in verse 27. He says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. And whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. Give to everyone who asks of you. Whoever takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Treat others the same way you would want them to treat you." He goes on to say, well, if you love those who love you, and if you're nice to those who are nice to you, what good is it to you? Even the sinners do that. So my question is, if we serve those who serve us, what good is it to us? We can't think in the worldly terms of fairness. We can't think when we're serving people, well, this person deserves it, this person doesn't. We're called to serve everyone that we possibly can. Another hindrance that's holding us back could be our past experience. We could have served before and something happened. We didn't get a thank you. Nobody ever told us thank you. Maybe we made things worse. We tried to serve, we tried to help, we made things worse. We're not going to do that again. Or maybe we tried to serve and we embarrassed ourselves. As worship coordinator, I've heard this before, where you get up here and you just freeze. You're supposed to lead a prayer and you forget. And then you're not going to go through that again, because that was embarrassing. There was a time, a little small rabbit chase. There was a time when on Sunday nights we used to have a service. On the fourth Sunday we would do singing, and there would be a short devotional, just 5-10 minutes. And that's how the first time I stood up and quote unquote preached was one of those 5 to 10 minute devotionals. So I did that once. I wrote down everything that I wanted to say. I had a whole script. And I just went through it. I went through it. Everybody said, "You did a great job. Good job, Daniel. Good job." So they asked me to do it again. So I was like, I got this. I'm really good now. I did it. I'm comfortable. I can talk in front of people. I don't mind. So I get up there, and I had 1 or 2 little notes written down. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm good. I'll figure out what to say. I'll get up there. I'll know what to say. So I get up there, and I freeze. I have no idea what I wanted to say. I have no idea what I meant with the little note that I took down. And I just froze. I said the verse, I think it was on not judging. And I said, you shouldn't judge. If you want to come forward and stand and sing, do you remember that? Yeah. If you want to come forward, stand and sing. And then that was it. It was probably 45 seconds I was up here. And I was so embarrassed. After we were done, I sat on those steps right over there, and I cried. I was so embarrassed. My dad came and talked to me, and I know he said some encouraging words, but the person that I remember coming to me and talking to me for a long time was Wayne Mathis, because he was the preacher at the time. He was the one whose job this was, to stand up here and talk to people. And I was filling in, and I messed up. And I remember him sitting down and encouraging me, telling me that this happens to everybody. Everybody messes up once. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're ready. But you can do this. I've preached a lot of times since then, but I don't know that if I didn't have that conversation, if those people weren't there to get me through that past experience, if I would have continued to preach. And that's a little side note, that we're called to help people, and that being a servant, as Wayne was that day, being a servant often leads others to servitude. Being a servant, helping, encouraging, leads others to that. But I think we need to understand that people are going to mess up. People are going to try to serve, and they're going to fall. And we can be embarrassed. We can also get no appreciation. This is the glory job, preaching. This is the one that stands up here. We talked about this in class, where people see the preacher. Preacher's the one that's, all the eyes are on him. This is the glory job. There are many jobs that keep this church running that are not glory jobs. Somebody has to cut the grass. Somebody has to fill up the communion cups. Somebody has to make sure the AC is working. Thank you today. somebody has to do these things. Somebody has to teach Sunday school. Somebody has to sharpen the pencils in the pew. There are a lot of jobs that people don't see. And those can be tough. Those can be thankless jobs. Those can wear on us. And I think that's a note to the rest of us to show gratitude to those people. It's very easy to show gratitude to the person up here that you see all the time. I even when I didn't think I did a good job, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 people that come up to me afterwards. You did a great job today, Daniel. Good job. Like, really? But there are a lot of jobs that don't get that recognition, that gratitude. And I think we need to seek out and help those people, because service is too often discouraged by past experience. Whether it be ours, we weren't thanked, or whether it be others. And sometimes people let us down, they hurt us, and we don't want to serve anymore. People told us we did a terrible job. I've heard that before too. And that could be discouraging to us. Others' actions, others' past experience can be discouraging. And we may think we're doing the right thing by laying off. But we may be discouraging somebody else's service by not allowing them to try again. If Wayne hadn't allowed me to try again, I probably wouldn't be able to fill in as I've been able to do for the last year or so. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the story in Acts 15, where there's a dispute between Paul and Barnabas. And in Acts 15, starting in verse 36, it says, "After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, 'Let us return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaim the word of the Lord, and see how they are.' Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also. But Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord." So there's such a sharp disagreement that they go their separate ways. Paul and Barnabas, this dynamic team that had gone to all of these cities proclaiming the Lord, there was a disagreement. And I'm not interested in debating whether one side was right, one side was wrong. Paul felt as if he had an intense responsibility. He had a very serious responsibility from the Lord to share the gospel. And he couldn't have anybody there that he couldn't trust. But I want us to look at Barnabas, and I want us to think really about what Barnabas does here. Barnabas was left too. Barnabas was left behind. John Mark deserted him just like he deserted Paul. But Barnabas gives John Mark another chance. He gives him another opportunity. And if we skip forward to the end of the story, we know where this ends. Mark becomes one of the writers of the 4 books known as the Gospel. He becomes a pillar of the early church. If Barnabas hadn't given him that other opportunity, I don't know if we can say for certain or not that Mark would have been in that situation. Barnabas was an encourager, given his name, in good times and bad. People did good, he encouraged them. People messed up, he encouraged them. Whether it be our own or others, we shouldn't be letting the past affect our service. We should be able to give opportunities. We should be able to serve regardless of past experiences. And that can hold us up and that can keep us from serving because of those. The last reason I want to talk about is we just don't. We just don't serve. We get in the habit of not doing it. Humans develop habits. Humans get into routines. And we can get into the habit of not serving. In Hebrews chapter 6, the writer of Hebrews is writing, and earlier in chapter 5 and 6, he talks about how there are those who don't mature, those who don't believe the elementary teachings. But in chapter 6, he tells, starting in verse 8, he tells them that I want something better for you. And then in 10 through 12, he says, "For God is not unjust so as to forget your work and the love which you have shown towards his name, and having ministered and is still ministering to the saints. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence so as to realize the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you will not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promise." The writer's here telling them that in order to grow, in order to get past those elementary teachings, we want something more for you. We want you to push forward. We want you to work and know that the Lord doesn't forget your work. And keep working so that you don't become sluggish. And And I think that's the point here, that if you stop working, if you stop serving, if you stop doing the things you should be doing, you become sluggish. And you won't have that full assurance of hope till the end. I think following Christ requires service. It requires a maturity that comes with continuing to push forward, continuing to work. I think when we look at the verse that we read this morning in Ephesians chapter 4, it's about the leaders helping us all to service. It's the preacher, he gave some to be preachers, apostles, teachers, to help all to come to the service. All to come to be ready to serve. But part of being ready means getting into habitual action. It means doing. It means going. There's a quote from Aristotle that I really like, and it's we are what we repeatedly do. And then he continues, excellence is therefore not a habit, but not an act, but a habit. So if we want to be servants, if we are what we repeatedly do and we want to be servants, we need to start serving. We need to start doing things. We can't let the phrasing of this poster confuse us, because I think it can. I think if you look at ready to serve as a question, it's, well, I need to make sure I have everything in line. I need to make sure I have this checked, and this checked, and this checked. And then, once I have everything checked off my list, then I'm ready to go out and serve. I think part of being ready to serve is starting to serve, starting to do things, starting to get in the habit of service. It's not like being ready to drive where you need to check the mirrors, check the seat, make sure your seatbelt's on, and then you're ready to drive. Start serving, and then you'll be ready to serve. Start doing things. Troy, Dave, and I have preached on this for 7 months now. And we've talked about things that will help us get us ready for service. Part of that's, changing of our attitudes, making sure that we value people, make sure that we value individuals, making sure that the church is doing the things that it should do so that when opportunities come, we are ready to serve in that capacity. We talked about how to value people. We talked about how to understand what evangelism entails, so that when that opportunity comes up, we're ready to serve as an evangelist. But this isn't a wait to serve. This question mark doesn't mean, well, I want to serve, but I'm not sure we're ready yet, because it's a question. It's, are you ready to serve any opportunity that comes up right now? Because it's easier to serve when you start serving. I know that may sound confusing, but I hope it makes sense to you. So in order to do that, we need to remove and recognize the hindrances to our service. We've got to forget about what the world tells us about fairness and who deserves our service. We can't let our past or others' past affect our service to them or to others. And we need to get moving and remove the sluggishness from our lives. We need to start serving. One thing that I was thinking about, and it's kind of an alteration of a different quote I had heard, and I think it sums this up pretty well, especially the first 2 points, that we serve people, and we should serve people because of who God is and what he's done for us, not who they are and what they can or have done for us. We serve because God is who he is, and he has done everything for us, not because that person deserves our service or they've done anything or can do anything for us. And when we approach service this way, I think the hindrances will seem like minor speed bumps. When we start recognizing that every human being is either a brother and sister in Christ or somebody we want to be a brother and sister in Christ, and we start serving people that way, the hindrances will go away, and we'll get in the habit of serving, because we are what we repeatedly do. And when we think about all the things that God has done for us, God has sent his son so that we can have forgiveness and the opportunity to live eternally with him in heaven. And he's done that for them too, no matter who they are. And when we start seeing people that way and start serving that way, I think we will be ready to serve, ! If there's anything the church can do for you this morning, if you would like to commit your life to Christ today, we encourage you to please come forward as we stand and sing.